Dana Oren had transcribed 17 records correction boards in 14 months, and not one of them had surprised her. They ran the same way every time. The officer opened the file. The claimant either produced documentation or didn't, and the board voted. 40 minutes, sometimes less. She set her recorder on the corner of the table, smoothed her notepad, and waited. The woman across the table was not what Dana had expected. She had read the file that morning. Denton, Mara J., Civilian Base Archivist, GS6, Fort Calder Records Division, and the image she had built was a woman who spent her days cataloging deployment folders in a climate-controlled basement room. Dana had pictured someone apologetic, someone who would come in with a folder of her own, stacked with character letters, maybe a congressman's aide on speakerphone. People who were about to lose something usually brought ammunition. Mara Denton had brought nothing, a single manila envelope, sealed, sitting flat on the table in front of her. She had arrived 4 minutes before the board convened, thanked Dana by name when Dana pointed her to the correct chair, and sat down with the particular stillness of someone who had learned a long time ago that stillness was a form of command. She was younger than Dana had expected, late 20s, dark-haired, slight in a gray civilian blazer, and she sat as if she had been bolted to the chair. Major Lyle Garrett opened the board at 0900. He was thorough and fair about it. Dana would grant him that. He read the original citation aloud without editorial comment. Army Commendation Medal with Valor for actions at Firebase Alden on the 14th of March, 2 years prior. He described the discrepancy without drama. Denton's documented assignment on that date was Communications Specialist, Foxtrot Company Support Element, a rear echelon position 12 kilometers from the firebase. The citation, by contrast, referenced a direct fire contact event at Alden itself. The board had been convened to resolve the inconsistency, and, if the citation could not be supported by documentation consistent with her actual assignment, to correct the record. He set the file down and looked at her. Miss Denton, the board has reviewed your assignment orders, your personnel file, and your separation record. Do you have documentation you'd like to submit in support of the original citation? She looked at him directly. No, sir. Garrett's pen moved. Dana wrote it down. Is there anything you'd like to say for the record regarding your role at Firebase Alden on the 14th of March? I was there, she said. The citation is accurate. Your assignment orders place you at the rear element that day. Yes, sir. Can you explain the discrepancy? No, sir. Garrett sat back slightly. He was not unkind. Dana had worked enough boards to read that. But he had a file in front of him and a procedure to follow, and the file did not support what the citation claimed. He had not filed this board out of malice. He had filed it because a discrepancy existed, and it was his job to resolve discrepancies. Dana understood that. She had thought, driving in that morning, that the woman would simply fail to appear, which would make the whole thing easier. Then she had thought the woman would come in angry, which would make it harder but faster. She had not considered that the woman would come in like this. Composed, patient, not resigned. There was no slump in her, no flicker of defeat behind the eyes, but settled in the way that a fixed point is settled. As if she had been waiting for this room for some time, and had decided, well before she arrived, exactly how she was going to sit in it. Garrett walked through the citation's language again, line by line. She answered each point in 1 or 2 words. She did not elaborate. She did not argue. The manila envelope stayed flat on the table, untouched. Dana kept writing. The clock on the wall moved past 0920. At 0931, the door opened. Dana's pen stopped before she consciously registered why. She looked up. The man in the doorway wore 2 stars on his collar. He was perhaps 55, gray at the temples, and he carried a thin briefcase and the kind of bearing that made the air in a room rearrange itself. Behind him, in the hallway, Dana could see 3 men in dress uniforms, not senior officers, NCOs, Staff Sergeant, Sergeant First Class, Staff Sergeant, standing in a line with the careful posture of men attending something they had traveled to attend. Major Garrett was already on his feet. General Harwick. His voice had a new quality. Not fear, something more precise. Recalibration. Sir, this is a closed administrative proceeding. I know what it is, Major General Harwick said. He did not raise his voice. He crossed to the head of the table, set the briefcase down, and looked at Garrett the way a man looks at a door that has been left open in winter. "Sit down, Major." Garrett sat. Harwick did not look at Mara Denton. Dana noticed that. He made a point of not looking at her, as if her presence in this room was something he intended to correct before he acknowledged it. He opened the briefcase. He placed a folder on the table, then a second, then what appeared to be a small digital playback unit, matte black, the kind Dana associated with classified evidence handling. "I saw the board convening notice 6 days ago," Harwick said, addressing the room rather than any individual in it. "I made 3 calls. This is what those calls produced." He tapped the folder. Firebase Alden, 14th of March, 2 years prior. JSOC after-action file, declassified for this proceeding, by authority of my office. He paused. "The citation is accurate." Garrett opened his mouth. "The discrepancy in her assignment orders exists," Harwick continued, "because her presence at Firebase Alden was not documented in her personnel file by design. The nature of her secondary attachment on that date was classified at the time of separation. It has remained sealed." He looked at Garrett steadily. "You filed this board without pulling the classified reference, Major. That is a failure of due diligence, not a failure of character, and I am not here to reprimand you. I am here to correct the record." Dana's pen was not moving. She became aware of this and made herself write. But her handwriting was not what it normally was. Harwick pressed a button on the playback unit. The room filled with static, the compressed, distance-eaten hiss of a military radio under stress, and then a voice. It was her voice. Dana knew it immediately, because she had been listening to Mara Denton speak in measured syllables for the past 31 minutes. And this was the same voice, the same cadence, only stripped of everything civilian, flat, precise, speaking in the clipped, unhurried shorthand of a woman working a radio under fire, with the complete and total focus of someone who has reduced the world to a grid and a frequency. She was calling a strike. Dana understood enough of the language to follow the shape of it: a close air support package, aircraft inbound, a target designation, and then the coordinates. And Dana did not fully process what she was hearing until Harwick said it aloud. "She called that strike onto her own position," he said. "Firebase Alden was overrun on the north and east walls. She was the last functioning radio operator. She had 9 men sheltering in the armory structure. The strike was the only option that would break the contact and hold the perimeter until the QRF arrived." He let that sit in the room for a moment. "She called it twice. The second package came in 11 minutes after the first. You can hear, in the recording, that she is calling the second package from inside a burning structure." Dana looked at the playback unit. The voice continued, unhurried. She heard, underneath it, faintly, in the compression, what might have been fire. Harwick closed the playback unit. 9 men survived Firebase Alden. 3 of them are in the hallway. He glanced at the door. "They asked to be here. I did not invite them. They found out through their own channels that this board was convening, and they drove or flew from 3 different installations to attend." He opened the second folder. Sergeant First Class Mara Denton is the youngest woman in the Army's history to hold a classified Joint Terminal Attack Controller Master Instructor certification. She held the Firebase Alden perimeter for 11 hours. She sustained a shrapnel wound to her left side during the first strike package that she did not report until after the QRF secured the site, because reporting it would have required her to relinquish the radio. He looked at Garrett. Her silver star is in this folder. It was not included in her separation record because the operation it references was classified at the time. The Army Commendation Medal with Valor was issued as an interim acknowledgement, pending declassification. What this board has been convened to strip is the lesser of her 2 decorations. The room had a particular quality of silence now. Dana had transcribed boards where the silence meant nothing, the procedural pause between one agenda item and the next. This silence was different. It had weight. It pressed against the walls of the room the way water presses against a hull. Major Garrett was looking at the folder. He had not spoken since he sat down. At the table, Mara Denton had not moved. The manila envelope was still flat in front of her, still sealed. She had not opened it because she had never needed it. She had brought it the way someone carries an umbrella in weather they know will turn, not out of hope exactly, but out of a habit of readiness. Her hands were folded in her lap. Her face was the face of someone who has already finished waiting and is simply allowing the room to catch up. Harwick looked at the board members, 2 captains and a master sergeant, all of whom had been staring at the playback unit as if it had spoken to them personally. "This board is adjourned," he said. "The original citation stands. The Silver Star will be entered into her record in this office, today, before I leave this installation." He picked up his briefcase. Then, for the first time since he entered the room, he looked directly at her. "Sergeant Denton." She stood. He rendered the salute first. Dana had been in the Army long enough to know what it meant for a major general to render the first salute. She had known it intellectually. She had never seen it done. She watched Harwick hold it, clean and exact, the old precise way, the way that meant something. And she watched the 2 captains and the master sergeant come to their feet one after the other, without an order or a word, and she watched Major Garrett stand last. His face an expression she could not quite name, something between mortification and the particular look of a man who has just understood that he has been measuring the wrong thing. In the hallway, through the partially open door, Dana could see the 3 men in dress uniforms. They had straightened to attention at some point she hadn't noticed. One of them, the sergeant first class, broad-shouldered, a long-heeled scar along his jaw, had removed his beret and was holding it in both hands at his chest. His eyes were fixed on the woman at the table with the expression of a man looking at something he had believed, for a very long time, he might never see again. Mara Denton held the return salute and lowered her hand. She picked up the manila envelope. She did not open it, and she did not explain it. She tucked it under her arm. She looked at Garrett, not unkindly. "You did your job, Major," she said. "There was a gap in the record. You were right to flag it." Garrett said nothing. His mouth moved slightly, but nothing followed. She turned and walked to the door, and the 3 men in the hallway stepped back to let her through, and then, without a word among them, fell into step behind her. The sound of their boots faded down the corridor. Dana realized she had stopped writing again. She looked down at her notepad. The last entry read, 0931. Door opened. Everything after that was blank. She thought about what she would write. The board had adjourned. The citation stood. The Silver Star would be entered into the record. She could document all of that in the standard form, in the standard language, and it would be accurate, and it would be dry, and it would give no one who read it any sense at all of what it had been like to sit in that room with the radio playing and that voice coming out of the speaker, flat and precise and completely unafraid, calling the fire in on herself. She wrote it down anyway. That was her job. She wrote it as accurately as she could, and when she got to the part where the general rendered the first salute, she wrote that down too, and she did not try to explain it further. Some things, she had learned that morning, carry their own explanation. She was the last one out of the room. She turned off the recorder, capped her pen, straightened her notepad. In the hallway, quiet now, she passed the chair where Mara Denton had sat through 2 hours of institutional doubt in absolute stillness, with a sealed envelope on the table in front of her, and nothing in her hands, and nothing to prove to anyone. Dana stood there for a moment. Then she walked back to her desk, sat down, and did not reach for the next file for a very long time.